being held on the 31st of January 2024, and I'm glad I got that right because I normally say 2024. This meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that the committee resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with Governance and Audit Committee members attending in person at the Council Chamber, County Hall, Ruthin, or remotely via video conference. For transparency purposes, I will ask the monitoring officer to identify which Governance and Audit Committee members are in attendance and whether they are attending in person or remotely. Those attending remotely are kindly asked to mute their microphones unless they are called upon to speak. Governance and Audit Committee members are also asked to have their videos switched on throughout the meeting, unless I specifically request you to turn your video off to improve the quality of the audio link when you are speaking. You will be expected to restart your video once you have finished speaking. Please also refrain from using the chat facility as messages sent to all are visible on the webcast. Those present in the chamber are asked to make sure that they speak directly into the microphone to improve the quality of the sound for those attending remotely. To aid transparency, all the meeting's business must be conducted through the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, members of the committee who are attending in person in the chamber, Mr. David Stewart, lay chair of the committee, Councillor Mark Young, vice chair, Councillor Adwell Roberts and Councillor Bobby Feely. Remote attenders on screen are Councillors Ellie Chard, Justine Evans, Carol Holliday, and lay member Mr. Nigel Rudd. There are also observers online, which is Councillor Ellen Heaton, and Councillor Gwyneth Ellis is also present in the chamber, but not a member of the committee. Also in the chamber are officers to support the committee today.
I just want just a few things before we start the agenda. I'd like to welcome Councillor Bobby Feely, who joins the committee. Welcome aboard. To replace Councillor Andrea Tomlin. Welcome to the other councillors here. It's good to see you, and officers. Just to say, we've got, as far as the agenda is concerned, I intend to have a comfort break, probably between items 5 and 6, but we'll see how it goes on. Just I'll give you some advance notice of that, so in case anybody gets desperate. Okay, right. We'll start the agenda. Item number 1. Apologies. I've had apologies from a lay member, Paul Witham.
We've not received any other apologies, Chair.
Everyone else is here. Okay. Declarations of interest. Thank you, Gary.
Diolch, Mr. Cadeirydd. Na'i neud hwn yn Gymraeg.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll do this in Welsh. Members be aware of the requirements under the Council Code of Conduct to express any declaration of interest, any business considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it is a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the meeting for the duration of the business and cannot take part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any votes. If a personal or prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available either from the committee support staff or online.
Any declarations of interest that can be made from members? Nigel Rudd. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. A personal interest in respect of membership of the GAC for Conwy Council.
Councillor Ellie Chard.
I just thought I'd mention, having read the papers, I did have a very old lady friend that did live in Gardnell Newydd. She's no longer with us because she died just before COVID, but I just thought I'd mention So I have visited the site. Okay, I just thought I'd mention it.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarity, that wouldn't, thank you for
No.
mentioning, that, but it's not an, it wouldn't be an interest declaration.
Yeah,
Just two.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just two non-prejudicial interests for myself. Item 6, I'm in respect of item 6, I'm in receipt of a pension from Clwyd Pensions, and item 9, I'm a member of Wrexham Council's Government and Audit Committee. So, okay. Declaration of interest, still gone, and no more, right. Number 3, urgent matters, if there are any. Nope. Right, number 4, the minutes. We need to receive the minutes of the Government and Audit Committee meeting held on the 22nd of November 2023. I think what we'll do, as usual, we'll go through them page by page in regard to accuracy and then the matters arising. We'll go, there might be some substantive items there, but we'll just go through page by page in regarding to accuracy first. So I'll go through it. I'll just call out page by page, and if you think there's something you want to correct or you want to query the accuracy of something, just please raise your hand. I'm looking at my screen. I'm trying to look at that screen as well. So thank you. I can't go cross-eyed. So page 4. Nigel, thank you.
Chair, just clarification, please. Representation was made to receive an urgent matter under item 3. If you could clarify how that matter is being handled, Chair, at this point in the meeting, that would be helpful, please.
Sorry, Nigel, could you repeat that?
Yeah, representation was made to receive an urgent item and report back on an urgent item under item 3 to you as chair for consideration at this meeting. Could you clarify how that matter and when that matter is to be addressed? It refers to the budget check.
Yeah, is this an email, the email I received from you?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't know it was being made as part of item 3, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was in relation to section 100B4 of the Local Government Act 72. However, it's regarding the financial situation and a budget update, and I intended to handle that in part of under matters arising as we go through the minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we go through the minutes, page by page, as I say, but any errors, or do we go on the accuracy of the minutes? Page 4, page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, just to say, on page for myself, on page 18 and 19 of the minute of the pack, in regarding to the annual corporate health and safety report that we received last time, I think there's something missing there. I think we did say that and the following item, property compliance report, in future will be information reports in order to try to manage the agendas of the committee. So that's page 19, page 20, 21 and 22. I think that's everything there. So no other errors, nothing else regarding accuracy of the minutes. Not just errors, sorry. Anything missing? Okay. So now we go through matters arising. If we go back to the minutes, the beginning of the minutes of the last meeting on page 4. And anything on page 4, page 5? On page 8, under where it's referring to page 8 of the minutes of the last time, the annual governance statement. They said the monitoring officer confirmed he would be meeting with the chief internal auditor before the next annual governance statement to report discuss the addition of a commitment to good governance to be included. Is there any?
We haven't met yet, but we will be
Okay.
before the annual.
This is
government
for the suggestion that the council in its documents makes an explicit reference to its
to-
commitment to good governance. We
governance,
know there is a
yes.
commitment to good governance, but it's to make an explicit commitment there. Okay, so that's to happen. Going on to anything else? I want to raise something on page 16. It was the I can't find it now. It was the reference to the shared prosperity and levelling up funding. Can't find where it is now in the minutes. I think I've. Someone help me, sorry. There's a reference to, I think it was from the minutes of the earlier meeting to refer to, but there was a suggestion that could the council look at current processes to apply for high value grant funding and maximise the benefits of all funding opportunities. And I think that has been to scrutiny chairs and vice chairs, and it is scheduled to be looked at by the performance scrutiny committee in this November.
It is this year. Hand on heart, I can look for you now, but hand on heart, I don't know the exact date, but I
It's
know
November.
I know
Yeah,
scrutiny chairs
yeah.
have confirmed that
Yeah.
they will take it to performance scrutiny.
Yeah. Nigel Rudd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was the reference to officers to investigate the levelling up funding, the drawdown of all post-Brexit funding that Gary had indicated he would take to the next meeting of the chairs and vices of scrutiny. That was the item, Chair, I think you were trying to track.
Okay, thank you. Page 19. There was a reference. Is it page 19? So I think I've got my page numbers mixed up. So I do apologise for that. The reference to the joint inspection of child protection, the JICPA.
Yep,
Inspection that you see the meeting before last.
I did meet with Nicola to discuss. We haven't actually sent a letter, but I know that Nicola has raised this with regulators directly, and we have another meeting on Friday with regulators where we intend to raise the issue again and probably look to draft some correspondence on the back of that, which we will share with the committee beforehand.
Sorry, Councillor Feely.
Can I just say that what the numbers you're calling out don't tally with mine. So could you give the heading and the number as opposed to the page number when you're going to refer to something? That would be quite helpful. Thank you.
It's down, and I seem to have made a mistake. So my page numbers are up, which is why I'm going a bit slow this morning. I do apologise for that. We're just going through we're going through the minutes as part of item 4. And we just bear with me, sorry. I'm having difficulty finding things here. Which issue in particular were you? Okay. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I've got my page numbers wrong.
The pages don't tally with mine. So could you give the headings, like, for example, number 6 budget process, for example, rather than the page number? I haven't got a specific query because I wasn't involved.
Yeah. I do apologise. We're now on page 9, pack page 9, and it's item 5 in regard of the corporate risk register, which is the next thing I wanted to talk about briefly. As I say, apologies for that. It was on the next page, on what's now page 10, the fourth bullet point down. It said members agreed that following an update to the corporate risk register, which we received at the last meeting, a briefing summary be prepared as an information report to Government and Audit Committee. That's going to come to us hopefully in the June meeting, when we receive the annual governance statement and the performance self-assessment, because the corporate risk register should inform both of those documents. Members also suggested a single summary report to be presented on a more regular basis to illustrate any changes. Something more visual, I think, is something that members had in mind. The monitoring officer stated if committee wanted information on a more regular basis, that could be requested to officers. We talked about a more iterative reporting of the corporate risks. Officers suggested taking comments back to the team for observations in ways of providing more regular information to the committee. This was following, if you remember, we had a training session from the corporate risk officers. Since then, I have met, I think, Mark, were you with me? I can't remember now. So we had a meeting with the risk officers since the last meeting. You weren't there, obviously, no. Anyhow, sorry. It's not going well this morning. I do apologise. It's the first one of the new year. Yeah. Just to say that I did have a meeting with officers and with Councillor Julie Matthews. There were a few things in regard that to risk management that we identified with at the training session and at the last meeting of this committee. The guidance for risk management has been amended, so it's more explicit as to the remit of this committee in respect of risk management. Formally, it just said that we were there in effect to look at the process, but it's now been amended. So it also talks about our role in respect to governance-related risks. The revised guide will be shared with the next corporate risk report sent to the committee for information in April or June. I think it's meant to be June. We also discussed the idea of a focused workshop for the committee in the early summer on risk, following on the early one that we had. The arrangements for this will be discussed with myself as chair and any other interested committee member. And I think we've got a meeting for this arranged in April. But the proposal is that the session will provide us as members with the opportunity to work through some examples of risks being presently managed. If you remember, we were saying that we're supposed to comment and receive assurance about the risk management of the council. We get the corporate risk register, but we don't necessarily know what's going on at the other levels, at projects and service level risks. And therefore, we wanted some assurance that they are being managed in such a way that they can't escalate up or escalate down. And that's correct. We're assured about the procedures for that. So there's going to be another workshop probably in the summer on that, but we're going to have a meeting to discuss that in advance. Finally, I discussed with officers an operational proposal to move the council from a 6-monthly corporate risk reporting to a more iterative, to either quarterly, responding to the committee's request. This was in response to our request for providing more frequently. That proposal is going to be discussed with the corporate executive team in March. If they're in agreement, the approach would be piloted initially to see whether it meets officers' needs, but also whether it's practical within existing limits. We're just trying to make, I think the idea is to make risk management reporting more of a dynamic, real-time thing rather than every 12 months or every 6 months. We thought this would be advantage not only to us as a committee, but also to performance scrutiny and indeed to Cabinet as well, when they go through it. So that's me reporting back to you on risk management. Anything else on that before we move on? Okay, still within the minutes and matters arising from the minutes. Then we go on to page Arwell, Councillor Arwell.
Michael, just something minor. Yesterday we had a decision of what the tax is going to be through the next financial year, and leader of the cabinet said that these are now cuts, and in these minutes, they say that these are savings. Are we going to change savings to being cuts?
Someone respond to that.
Well, matter of geiriau
It's a
ydi
matter
hynny.
of wording, to be honest. It's a matter of wording. They more or less describe the same thing. If we cut something, then we're saving money. We will look at how we do that corporately, but the words don't fox anybody. You know, it's clear what's happening. But savings or cuts are describes the very same thing. Sorry. Just to add to that, Gary, I think that the savings also can include creating an income. So cuts would be incorrect because savings includes cuts and creation of income. That answers is far better answer than mine. Yeah, and there are still things that we do from in terms of efficiencies and such that's a part of savings as well. So savings describe everything, but there are cuts in the mix. Thank you.
Mae'n bwynt teg.
It's a fair point, I think, that maybe we should look at it corporately, moving forward with the process of setting the budget for next year. Possibly we may need to put more of an emphasis on what do we call, bringing more income in, what do we call efficiency, and what do we call, a cut to a service. That possibly would help. I think during the process this year, we've used the word savings to cover everything. But as Gwyneth and Gary has originally said, that covers lots of things. Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you. Which brings us nicely to the next item, which is still going through matters arising. Item 6 from the minutes of last time was a budget process update. I understood, I think it's likely that we might have a few points of observations or questions on this as a committee. I think we agreed last time that the GAC role is not about the pros and cons of specific savings or, let's say, proposals for income, as we've just been talking about. But it's not about the pros and cons of particular measures, but it's for us to receive assurance about the processes involved to ensure that the council can balance its revenue budget for the next financial year, and indeed, as far as possible, for subsequent years, and also concerning the impact on the council's corporate governance processes as well. We said the three things we needed to be made aware of were any savings proposals which were found not to be accurate for some reason, or any other projections. I think we specifically said in the minutes it says savings, but it's any other financial proposals and any other projections, I should say. We also want to be made aware of anything, any proposals which are unlikely to be achieved. So the first one was the accuracy of the proposals. The second one is them not being achieved. And then thirdly, any impacts on the corporate governance of the council, since we're not just here about the financial affairs, but here also about the corporate governance of the council overall. If there's going to be any impacts on that, we need to be aware of that. We agreed last time that budget update reports would be received in June and November, as per last year, at least twice a year. But sooner than that, if there's any significant events or deviation from what is planned or expected. I think at this point, I know Liz has come to this meeting now, and I think it'd be worthwhile perhaps just giving us a verbal update. And I think Member Nigel Rudd, the email to me, the urgent business. If there's anything in particular that I'd suggest we hear what Liz says, and then feel free to come in respect to your email then, which is what I propose to do in respect to your request. So Liz, and then anything from Nigel, and then any other queries questions that other members have. Thank you.
Thank you. So I suppose that today we've got some members of the committee that are more informed than others, because those that are members were at full council yesterday where full budget proposals were considered. But to be fair to our lay members who may not have had time overnight to have sat through the 3-hour meeting where we discussed budget yesterday. So forgive me, members that sat through yesterday, but to be fair to our lay members, we need to bring them up to speed on where we're at with budget. So yesterday, the full budget proposals went through. So the estimated level of pressure, so the cost of providing services in 24-25 compared to 23-24, in total came to 24.5 million in pressures. And that's those proposals, those pressures were met in a combination of an increase in funding from Welsh Government through the provisional settlement of circa 7 million. Savings proposals were brought forward and they were split into major savings proposals, non-strategic savings, and also a further target of 3 million that's been set to all heads of service and schools, getting to 10.4 million. And then the gap was 7.5 million, which was being bridged with a council tax increase of overall 9.34, but that was 8.23 for council services and 1.11 for the increase in the fire levy. So the budget overall, our net budget, moves in 23-24 from 251 million up to just shy of 265 million. And that was approved by council yesterday. There's no planned use of reserves in how we balance that budget, but there was details in there of how we plan to use reserves to fund things like the cost of employees exiting the organisation, and that would be both through compulsory redundancies where they are needed through some of the major savings proposals, and also then through the voluntary exit scheme that we have in place and are working through. Both Councillor Ellis and I yesterday were keen to point out the risks that are included in the budgets, and the things that we were pointing out was the level of savings. You know, it's a high target, it's a high level of savings that need to be found, higher than has been for the highest. So, you know, we were keen to point out the need that there will be a need to track carefully those levels of savings and be reporting them through to both Governance and Audit Committee, but also to members through Cabinet and Scrutiny Committees regularly. We were also pointing out the where we were at in terms of the 3 million savings that all heads of service have been given. So we were at needed to stress that heads of service know what their budget is for next year. They are working through that, and a number of those will be achieved through the voluntary exit schemes, but there are other things that are ongoing, and a commitment to keep members, and I include lay members in that, in how we are doing with those before the start of the new financial year. We're also explaining the difficulty in forecasting pressures this year. Inflation and also demand for services are incredibly difficult to forecast And I think that's something, you know, in discussing with Section 151 officers across North Wales, that we're all finding at the moment, trying to forecast demand, although we're using the latest forecast of demand that we've got, but that is quite challenging at the moment. Yeah, so I think if that's enough of a summary, but I'll take any specific questions that anybody has over and above that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or points or observations from members on the budget process? Councillor Mark Young.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for that. And it's understood it's going to be very challenging, and I think just be good to clarify. We've got the head of internal audit here. Be good how they're going to fit in, and just to touch on the capacity, because it's a huge piece of work. So a summary of how they're going to fit in and that ability to meet the needs we're going to need going forward, please. Sorry, Bob.
Can you respond to that, please, Bob? Thank you.
Yes, obviously I've met with CT Cabinet over the last few months, and obviously I'm meeting regularly with Liz, my boss, Section 151. The proposal is at the moment I'm meeting all heads of service to go through what their budget pressures are, identify the areas they're planning to save, and then over my next step then in the middle of February, I've got a meeting with Liz to then go through the Section 151 officer, to go through and outline what pressures each service are facing, where they're going to make their budget savings, and then the audit plan will be approved by CT in March 1st, end of March, beginning of April, to look at the budget savings that are in place and how audit's going to tackle them. We're not going to look at redoing what finance are doing, because obviously finance will track the budget, but what I will do is test the process that they have in place for each of the systems. So we'll be testing that their processes are robust and effective, and then obviously from a service point of view, we'll be looking at each service. Some of the areas we're looking at as process reviews, because some of the services have identified that they might want us to work with them early doors to set out the processes in place in different services, and that might help them streamline those services. And then obviously throughout the year, a proportion of the audit plan will be in place to revisit throughout the year. Pressure-wise, I've got a full team now, so that is really good. And obviously, most of them now have been 12 months in the job, so they've learned a lot in the last 12 months. And I'm pretty confident, you know, if we don't get a run of special investigations, the team will be able to do an awful lot on the budget area.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it's going to be a learning curve, but that's good. It's happening, but there's going to be a huge balancing act between your day-to-day work and this. But I'm sure you've got that in hand. So thanks for that, Jock about.
Liz, you want to?
Yeah, just add to that, in terms of, because I was thinking about the Governance and Audit Committee's role in this. So I think we've got meetings in early March and a meeting in April. I would suggest that I bring a report to the Governance and Audit Committee, probably at the April one, I think, but around what the process is for tracking, so that Governance and Audit Committee can scrutinise that process. And possibly we outline the budget strategy that a review almost of how things have gone in 24-20 in setting the 24-25 budget, so that is early enough to feed those comments through to Cabinet around how we do with the 25-26. So, you know, something I'm offering to do.
I was just going to, come in at the back just to add to what Bob had described, because I think as part of those conversations with Liz and potentially myself is understanding, to give the committee some assurance about where savings are being made, that's not compromising internal controls or any other governance arrangements, so that we, as you said, as part of your remit, is not just to scrutinise the financial affairs, but any impact on governance, and that can be part of that work as well.
Yes. Absolutely. I know, as Bob said, I mean, Liz is a Section 151 officer, is Bob's manager, line manager. But at the same time, Bob has independent status as well, and he can go direct to the chief executive or to myself. Not that that's not going to happen, but he just Bob is not, you know, if there was an issue there is that independence there. Nigel, I'll bring you in a minute. Just to respond to Bob, if you're going to the internal audit work that you do, I mean, obviously, when we look at internal audit work at the next meeting of the committee, obviously there's other issues for you as well. There's other work that internal audit needs to do, looking at internal controls and so on. But presumably, is this work on the budget proposals going to be sort of as far as possible done as early as possible in the financial year? Because obviously, if there are weaknesses found, they need to be addressed as early as possible. Possibly. I don't know if Liz or Bob wants to respond to that. Bob's got his hand up first.
I'll respond first, Dave. That's all right. Yeah, obviously from my role, it will be throughout the year. Some of the work we done in Q1, I've already identified one piece of work I want to do. I won't name the piece of work because obviously it's not been approved yet, but that can be done in Q1. I've met with another head of service who's keen to have these process reviews, which, as you know, Dave, they look at controls procedures in place. So we will be to give the Governance and Audit Committee assurance that, you know, appropriate controls still exist within the services. So I think a lot of the process reviews will help with the process that we'll be undertaking, but it will be throughout the 12 months, because obviously some of the savings aren't due to Q3 or 4 in some of the services. So it will be a case of when they've got the savings identified, we'll look at them with them first, and then obviously we'll have to go back and track the effectiveness of the savings in the way of performance on the service.
Liz, did you want to come in on that one as well?
Just to back up what Bob's saying there, really, I suppose we're talking about, have we achieved the savings? We're talking about the financial year 24-25. So although we might want to look at processes, actually we won't know until we're in the year how we're doing. So I know we're keen to get to this as quickly as we can so that we can learn the lessons for the next financial year. But the outcome is not going to be known until we're in the year. So we need to be, I think, realistic around that. But possibly some of these need to be thought of in 2 stages. So it's possibly, you know, a piece of work that's done early, but it's revisited later on in the year. And that's something that Bob and I will consider as we put that plan together.
Okay, thank you. And Liz, going back to your proposal for a report probably in April on tracking and also on the budget strategy, outline the budget strategy, I think that would be well worthwhile. I'd like to welcome that. I think if we can specifically minute that, please. Just to be clear, so that all members are clear, that's in addition to the regular budget updates that we would normally get anyhow. I was going to suggest maybe as you're doing at this meeting, even if that's for the April meeting, perhaps in the March meeting, we could still have a verbal update. Okay, if that's all right. Nigel Rudd.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I watched the last Cabinet meeting and yesterday's full council meeting, and can I commend both members and officers for the sterling efforts they have put in, and in the preceding preparation meetings. And I'm delighted that Gwyneth is still standing and Liz is still standing today following the exertions over the last 48 hours or so. What I want to do, and this is essentially probably aimed at Gwyneth and Liz and Gary, Chair, is to flag to you what I would expect as a GAC member and the GAC committee in relation to the budget process strategy and going forward, because I think at the moment there is potentially a missed opportunity, partly about the engagement with members and with the wider lay members, but also about using the last few months as a learning process. I think from my perspective, what I'd be looking at GAC is a report back ideally to the 6th of March, although I'm prepared to be swayed that it might be later, along the following lines. Effectively, the report should be a stress test of both the budget and the budget process. And within that, I'm going to suggest what I'd be looking for in the report Liz and Gary. The first 6 points on that report should cover the SIPFA identified 6 reasons why local authorities fail in section 114. And I know we haven't got papers today, which is why I'm going to go through them fairly briefly. The first is a heading about over-ambitious savings. The second is the lack of a medium-term financial plan that's robust. The third is about leadership. The fourth is about inadequate governance. The fifth is about weak financial management. And the sixth is about lack of reserves. All those items have been identified as common to section 114 authorities in that SIPFA report. And I think that there are statements around those. Liz, I know that you referred to during the course of your presentations, but need to be set out in a way that provides a robust response in the event that anybody subsequently comes back and says that we are contributing to or mitigating the potential for a section 114 notice. The other points on the report cover the following items. The use of the risk register to inform thinking explicitly in terms of high corporate risk, and that is a matter I think we're very strong at, and we had a very clear statement about the necessity to set a balanced budget at the last GAC meeting, and I think that's really positive and far clearer and focused than I've seen in other authorities. We need to come back next on the arrangements to track and report progress on the budget, which is what we've just been discussing. So there is a clear tracker of how effective those savings have been achieved. We need also, in my view, to get an Arling close opinion on the Treasury management implications of the capital programme as projected going forward. And I know we get Arling close reports, but there needs to be an opinion. We employ them as advisors. It would be an opportunity to use them focused on what the view is from a TM perspective of the future potential capital programme, because the capital programme revenue implications are significant on this authority, and we need to ensure that we are explicit about acknowledging that, not in the middle of a 10-page report from the advisors, but specifically as part of the GAC consideration. We also need that report to have the update on the £3 million exit scheme savings progress, which was a matter of considerable concern and discussion yesterday at the County Council meeting. So there's already reckoning on the progress that is being made. We also need to separate, in my view, and it's an issue that Gwyneth has just picked up, this issue around cost savings and fees and charges income generation. At the moment, the income generation aspects of the authority get lost in the debate and the feedback on business cases around savings and cuts. They're actually quite different. Income generating is, in terms of fees and charges, quite a specific opportunity for the council to raise its revenue. And Liz, as you said, we can't manage without sort of ensuring we've got sufficient revenue coming in. And can I draw your attention to one way of actually ideally doing this? I looked through the papers over the last few months, and I couldn't see robust business cases built around fee, income and charge increases in the same way as I potentially could see arguments about why cuts might have to be made or savings have to be made. I think there's a loss of opportunity there. SIPFA in about 2015-16 produced a benchmarking report which included a very useful questionnaire about fees and charges. And what that did was to highlight over about 10 areas of what the council's activities are, the specific fees and charges that might be applied, from issues like crematoria to respite care, to child support and similar, communal bookings, wasp removal, all the stuff neatly captured in terms of potential income generating activity for a council. And I think if the report could pick up on those particular benchmarking areas, it would allow a very explicit focus and business case to be built about, have we got charges in where we haven't, where we could and need to have them in? Have we got charges in at the right level? How do they compare with the charges of other authorities? And I think that piece of work, I think, is undercooked at the moment within the authority and may help in terms of trying to balance at a later stage. I'll give you one specific issue in this area, which might appeal to Mark, which is around planning fees. In the UK government increased the English planning fees between 25 and 35% in December just gone. I know these are prescribed fees by Welsh government. When was the last time they were increased by the Welsh government? Secondly, what are we doing in collaboration with other councils externally to enable pressure to be applied on the Welsh government to see an early uplift on those fees to match those with England if we haven't been doing it already? I think the issue around the medium-term financial strategy and the problems around projection of that, and the further away you get from today, the more difficult it is, I think should still be a focus so that we can flag when looking forward potentially the council tax increases in year 2 and year 3 as part of the debate. It's also important in looking at council tax increases to have a comparator about what's going on elsewhere in Wales. And last year, if you actually looked at what Denbighshire was trying to do on council tax increase last year against what was occurring elsewhere in Wales, we were a real outlier. We were the 3rd lowest council tax increasing authority across Wales. We were totally out of step. We were out of step in North Wales, we were out of step with much of the rest of Wales. And I think that there were debates, and we had those debates at GAC in the autumn and the spring prior to the council tax setting. And I think that we need to ensure that it's head that rules the business in terms of trying to ensure council tax increases are robust, as well as recognising the heart around idealism or sentimentality or political group positions in relation to it is going to be at the end of the day where members wish to make a decision. It's a very difficult debate, but part of that might be about ensuring that we are somewhere in a better understanding of the context of what we're doing, or have a specific reason why we don't. And I think an argument that says, for example, that we kept our council tax increase reasonably low last year was because we were in the middle of a cost of living crisis. It's exactly the same cost of living crisis that everybody else was experiencing. And I think there just needs to be a careful look at that from a political angle. And I'm not challenging the politics, but I'm just saying that there needs to be a look at it. I think the other area where we are weak at the moment is on national non-domestic rate or business rates. The level of collection of business rates across the authority and the level of return of business rates across the authority reasonably comparable, but most authorities, if you did an overview, you end up with about 15% return of business rates, 25% council tax, and the rest is RSG. In that scenario, I think we need to be better about consulting with the business community about what we're doing actually with funds that come from the business community and how it might be used and employed to benefit the business community. There seems to be a rather exclusive focus at the moment on residents within the council area and a lack of focus on the needs and wishes and aspirations of business. I'm sure we're doing stuff, but it's just not explicit enough, in my view, in terms of the consultation. And the final comment I'd make, Chair, is that we have not got the terms of reference for GAC, the council and scrutiny committees, in my view, in sync. There is a jarring both in terms of focus of those committees, a jarring in terms of timing of meetings of those committees, and a lack of understanding about what GAC is about. To arrive at a meeting here in January with no financial report formally on the agenda, I think is at least a missed opportunity and doesn't actually assist the council in arriving at an informed view. If the GAC can work in the way that I believe it can and should within this authority. It should inform the thinking and deal with the issues, for example, that get raised in yesterday's council meeting about the lack of proper governance. I mean, the lack of audited or financial strength, or the lack of strength in our financial management. I think there are issues that we can provide a shield of protection around the workings of the officers and the council in the run-up to a council tax and budget setting process in a way that is being missed at the moment. And I think the start of that is bringing in the type of report that I'm suggesting for March or later, but the earlier the better, and then a follow-up in terms of how you track the issues that I've identified in that shopping list of what I'd like to see on the report. That's the reason I asked for this matter to be raised as an urgent item, because there was no other opportunity on the agenda, Chair, apart from matters arising, that would allow the GAC to view the matter, and that remains a concern to me, and I would hope that doesn't happen again in the future. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Just to before we respond to that, just to clarify something, Nigel started. You started by reference to the section 114 report. Just for the benefit of members, I did issue that to all members back in the autumn, I think it was. It's quite a concise, easy to read report on the 3 English authorities that issued section 114 notices in 2022. And it is worthwhile reading. I was going to mention it again when we come to the Treasury Management item later on this morning. There's quite a lot of proposals there from Nigel. Nigel, I just missed something. Did you? It's due to either my hearing or the sound production. I heard all the various components you talked about there. Was this with a view to asking a report in March?
Yes, through you, Chair. I would ideally want to see a report in March covering these matters, as that would come in with providing some reassurance before the end of the financial year, particularly in relation to outstanding matters around savings, for example. If the officers, and I'm mindful that it is an ask of officers who've been working extremely hard to date, but I think it's a very, very important ask. And officers, I'd look for a response from officers as to when realistically they could bring the report back in full, or if they can't bring it back in full in March, something needs to come back in March, and then a full report at the first point in the new financial year would be my compromise, Chair.
Thank you. Would officers like to respond, or the lead member as well, if there's anything, if there's any responses? Then if the views of other members? Thank you.
I will respond. I mean, thank you, Nigel. There's a lot to take in there, and I think, you know, I'm absolutely open. I would need to discuss a lot of that with Liz to see what my response is. The one thing I would like to respond to directly is the council tax for last year, because I think last year we were faced with the same situation where you know, as a cabinet, we were looking to do what was necessary to balance the budget. I would dispute that we're an outlier in terms of our council tax. You don't look at just the in-year rise, but also, you know, what is our council tax level? And I think we're pretty close to the average in Wales in terms of how much what our council tax level is. And that's after the rise for last year. But of course, I would also like to say, I think setting the council tax is always going to be a political decision, isn't it? As are any other taxes. You know what I mean? When Westminster or the Welsh government decides on their taxation levels, there's going to be an element of politics that come into that decision. I don't think we're at the county council any different. Apart from the fact, of course, that we are well aware that we need to set a balanced budget, which maybe not every level of government needs to do. But anyway, thank you for that, Nigel, and I will definitely be interested in discussing with Liz the points that you raised.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider. I think some of the points that Nigel was raising, I think was what I was already suggesting in the reports to March and April. I get what's been included in terms of the points of SIPFA. I think that would be useful to sort of set the council's position where we, a view of how do we review against those 6 points that SIPFA are made, given it is, on our corporate risk register, one of the highest risk that we have. So yeah, I think that's it's a reasonable ask, and I think it's something we should do. And in some of the things around the update around the 3 million, the tracker savings, there's some things I need to go and have a look at in terms of, Alan Close's opinion, whether or not I can't speak for them, whether they would be willing to, but I can certainly go and have a discussion with them around that. If Nigel wouldn't mind, so that I know what he's referring to, the SIPFA questionnaire about income and benchmarking and around fees and charges. I think that's something from a budget process point of view, and the comment around savings and efficiencies and reductions to budget, and how we're doing in terms of income generating possibilities. Yeah, I think it's the right thing to do to split them out more. But I think these are all things for the budget process that need considering and moving forward. So I think the time is right to be looking at those kinds of things. And what are the dates? Sorry, I haven't got them in front of me for the committee. I think it's an early March committee. 6th of March. So the problem with that, of course, is, the deadline for papers, we're 2 weeks before that. So, only leaves a couple. This is a comprehensive report. I would like to go away, have time to discuss that with Gwyneth. There are bits around terms of reference, around scrutiny, around governance and audit that I'm sure Gary would want to comment on, and that might take a bit of time. So if I sort of pause there and bring Gary in.
Yeah. Just actually discussing with the chair, we've arranged a meeting for myself and Bob and Mark and Dave to look at the committee's terms of reference, can certainly broaden that out. If there was any impact on scrutiny terms of reference, then we'd need to take it to the chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny. But I think we've got a meeting in the diary later this month, provided everybody's available. So that work is beginning, so we can feed into a report on that.
Yeah, so and then in terms of time, is the April? Is it later on in April? 24th. Okay. So whilst we can give a verbal update on how the work is going at the March committee, I think I'd be struggling in terms of capacity to be able to bring something comprehensive. I'd rather wait and bring something fuller in the April. But I understand the point that Nigel is making around the urgency around this and around wanting to see that information sooner rather than later. I get that.
That I think so what we're proposing is you'd give a verbal update in March. The report that Nigel suggested we would get in April, and that would also encompass what you proposed earlier on, Liz, on tracking and outline budget strategy, obviously, as well as that we would still get later on the year the normal budget update reports as a matter of course. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think just going back to what Councillor Ellis said about council tax. I mean, it's not our job of as a committee to say what's right and what's wrong there. I take it. I mean, I take it what Nigel was saying there, but suggesting that I think we'll have assurance that all options have been considered. Not saying that all options are taken, because that's not our job. That, but we assurance that all options are no-go areas there. But I think it's a fair enough question from us there. So just to clarify that point, I think also. I think the other thing I took from what Nigel said, and he did message me in advance about this, and I suppose really some of these messages coming out from today, it would have been ideal they've been taken account of yesterday. So we probably do need to look at the timing of our meetings so we can inform cabinet and council meetings on a better basis. Thank you.
We can certainly take a look at that in respect to the calendar of meetings. Calendar of meetings is quite complex, but we have certain principles we follow. And if we need to amend those to put a GAC in before the budget meeting of council, then we can certainly make a note to do that next year.
Any other questions or any other issues on that point, on that suggestion of Nigel's? Councillor Early, sorry.
Sorry, thank you for your indulgence. It's just that I think without wanting to criticise now, because I do welcome Nigel's comments, and I actually, if it's possible, could I get a copy of that as well? Because it was a lot to digest without seeing it written down. But we did come to the last Governance and Audit Committee with the budget process. And I think lots of this, as in, did you look at the SIPFA report and did you consider the points there, are stuff that could have been brought up in that meeting. And I think that would have been more appropriate than just before the budget setting meeting with council and cabinets, because it gives, you know, as I said, I don't want to be critical because I do welcome this kind of comment, but maybe at the last Governance and Audit Committee, when we did come with a budget process report, would have been an appropriate place to bring these up. So just my observation.
It's a fair. Bobby Feely?
Yeah, it's my first meeting and I'm probably not entitled to say what I'm going to say, but to me, what Nigel, and I don't know Nigel at all, what is brought up under the minutes seems quite irregular in terms of how we run our minutes normally, how we run our meetings normally. So it feels a bit odd to be discussing this at this point in time on the G&A committee, but then I'm probably totally wrong there because that's my first meeting. There were people in the council meeting, the budget process yesterday, who were unsure about the fact that there was 3 million not identified as yet in savings, hoped for, obviously, as it says here, but not yet identified. So that was quite difficult for some members to take on board. Hence, it wasn't a unanimous budget. And just to touch quickly, as Nigel's brought it up, on last year being out of sync with most of the rest of the authorities in Wales, it felt to me like they had looked ahead and thought of what was likely to come and set a higher budget. Hence, yesterday, we were told last year 3.8% because we did have a funding gap of 10.5, but we did have proposals to bridge that gap. So we felt quite optimistic this time last year that our budget setting process, with what we'd been involved in and what we'd heard, was okay. But we realise a year on that in actual fact, it would have been more appropriate to have had a slightly higher one then. And then the gap for our residents going from 3.8 to 9.3 would not have been quite so upsetting for residents. And let's be honest, business people are residents as well in Denbighshire. All people in general are going to get a shock, are shocked because it's probably out already. So I do acknowledge the point you made there, Nigel. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I think in terms of the minutes question, I think that's at the discretion of the chair. Clearly, there'd been a request from one of the members of the committee to discuss something, so it could either be done as an urgent item or it could be done as a matter arising from the budget process update. I think they're all valid considerations, and actually it's the work of this committee to point those sorts of things out, so I think that's fine. Clearly, what we can't do is end up having a rerun of the budget debate under matters arising, but you could even have dealt with this under the forward work programme. So there are a number of opportunities to deal with it. The important thing is that, you know, members are making their contribution in respect of the terms of reference of this committee. scrutinise the financial affairs of the council. So any of those proposals and suggestions will be received and, as Liz said, fed into a report to come back so that the committee can get the assurance it needs around the processes going forward. And, you know, I suppose I would make the point, this is the biggest sort of budgetary exercise we've ever had to go through. Will we need to learn lessons about how we've done it? Absolutely. And conversations have already started amongst senior officers about, well, how do we debrief out of this and make sure that, you know, we learn these lessons going forward, because next year is not going to be any easier than this year. You know, all the suggestions that Nigel's made are things that we really do need to take away and consider.
And most of them have come up in others. I think what Nigel's done has been useful to bring it all in one pot, as it were. As far as the regularity is concerned, I mean, Nigel emailed some of his concerns to me a few weeks ago. I didn't know whether that would go under item 3 as an urgent matter, or I decided to be discussed under matters arising. That was my choice there. I mean, that's why I asked Liz to be here for this item, and so I mean, I was quite expecting that to take place today. As far as the committee concern is concerned, I wouldn't say it's that unusual. We are trying to, and I know our agendas are set, but I think if we're going to be relevant as a committee, this is where we differ from a scrutiny committee. I'm not saying they're not relevant, but they can have their program. Please don't put their programs are set, their agendas set in advance. Our agendas, by the very nature of the role of this committee, have to be alive and in real time, as it were. So I don't accept it was irregular in any way, but I take your point. But
I see what you mean, but I mean, just as just an ordinary member of the council, I looked at the agenda, assessed how long it would take, thought the Care Inspectorate Wales would be the first item, and didn't anticipate that an hour after we wouldn't be into the Care Inspectorate. That's just from my point of view, trying to run my day. I was wrong about what I saw, because I didn't realise the minutes and matters arising from the minutes would take the time. You know, maybe I'm being selfish. Perhaps I should have just come with an open mind, but at least you know how I feel.
Okay, that's fine, but there's nothing. It's nothing particularly different to what I was anticipating. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just very quickly, the time has gone on. I think Nigel points are good. We're on a massive learning curve, and when the reports do come, they've got to be right. So if it's a month later, I think Nigel would agree. If that means they're going to be more relevant, that's good. And Welsh Audit are on. They've been talking about looking forward, so we feel in a better place. So I think the clarification of this debate's been good, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it'd be good if Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I thank Nigel, and Gwyneth has proposed that we have his points sent to us. I hope that everyone is included in that, not only the officers and the portfolio for finance, Gwyneth, that we all have the good points, and his experience is really welcomed here. And going back to Denbighshire raising rates over the years, we had I think we had the Rhyddlen Borough, who was with kind of in trouble all the time, and we have always been looking. And last year we thought, wow, we won't have to raise the rates as much, but perhaps he was right that we should have looked at it more thoroughly. But there we are. That's the situation we are. We can't go back and look what had to happen before too much. We are now going to be positive, and hopefully that we can make Denbighshire a better county after all this, what's been happening lately. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, thank you. Nigel, would you be okay? Presumably you were reading from a script of your own. Would you be able to sort of share that with myself, and I'd suggest Gary, and we can distribute it? And is that okay?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'm more than happy to submit the points that I've raised this morning, and thankful for members and their positive response, and recognise to Gwyneth in particular, I know that politicians at the end of the day make the decision, accept that.
I think that was yes. Can you it just from our point of view, there's something wrong with the sound system. You were talking so
That's a yes. That's a yes, sir. Yes, Chair.
thank you. Are there any more as far as the budget process? Any other matters on this? Moving on, because we still need to finish matters arising yet. I'm just going to whiz them through fairly quickly, really. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes that members want to comment on? I'm not going to go from page by page because we need to move on. Yeah, just to say, the Audit Wales timetable, I think that's quite important. Mike, you're here. Can I suggest that we discuss that under, if you're going to be here for the whole meeting, the last but one item is the agenda, is the work programme. I'm thinking about the report on the close down of the accounts. You were going to give an update. Do you want to, are you okay waiting to that item, or do you have to go before that item?
No, absolutely fine to leave it to the end, Chair. No problem at all. Thank you for checking.
Okay, thanks, Mike. As far as the minutes are concerned, we're asked to receive the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee held on the 22nd of November 2023, allowing for the extra report we're going to get in March. That's one of the major points to come out of it from the report that's been requested from Liz. Can I ask for someone to propose that we accept the minutes? Councillor Mark Young, someone to second it? Lee Chard, all in favour? Okay. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 5, the Care Inspectorate Wales Inspection Report. Thank you for waiting very patiently. We do appreciate it. Can I suggest that, just to say as an opening remark, we're talking about, we've been, in the previous item, we've been talking about very gloomy times, unprecedented financial pressures on local authorities. When I read this report, it was like a breath of fresh air. The sun came out and the clouds drifted away there. So it was really refreshing to read such a report. However, if I could welcome is it Councillor Ellen Heaton and sorry. Katie New and Nicholas Stubbins and Councillor Heaton. Welcome to the meeting. I don't know who's going to open this and present this. Councillor Heaton, thank you.
Diolch Cadeirydd a bore da pawb. I'm glad to hear that, Chair, because those are my thoughts too, and I really am glad to be presenting such an uplifting report this morning for your discussion. As you're aware, it's Care Inspectorate Wales inspection report on our in-house domiciliary support service, and it took place in August last year. And it's an extremely positive report. It's split into 3 main areas of wellbeing, care and support, and leadership, all of which are extremely encouraging. And notably, in the report, you've seen that no areas of improvement have been identified. So this report does stand as a true testament to the dedication of our team here in Denbighshire. And it's even more commendable when you consider the wider context and the challenges that the sector faces. So I'll just keep my part very brief, if that's okay, Chair, and I'll pass over to the officers because I'm sure they're very keen to go into more detail on this report. Diolch.
Okay. Someone had to give a summary. I mean, I think I'm going to assume the members have read the report. We just give the overall summary. It's that'd be worthwhile for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass over to Katie to do that if that's okay. I just wanted to sort of introduce Katie a little bit more formally. Katie is our responsible individual, and the report specifically refers to that statutory role.
That was one of my questions. What's the responsible individual?
So yes. So the other thing I just wanted to ask the committee to cast their mind back to previous Care Inspectorate Wales inspection reports, which we've presented to committee on our residential care homes, which also sit within Katie's service, and also as the RI for Denbighshire, Katie has that role of assurance for us under the RISCA legislation. So we had inspections on both of our residential care homes as well in the last 12-18 months, and they were exceptionally good as well. So without further ado, I will pass over to Katie, but I think it's very easy, isn't it, to pick up one inspection report and say this is really, really good, but how does that sit in the context of the wider service and the provision to that particular client group? And, you know, this is in the context of others of exceptionally good standard. Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping you have read it. It's quite a short report. I've summarised the findings of the inspection. As with any inspection, we were racked with nerves because although you think you're okay, when somebody else comes and looks at it, it's always a nerve-wracking experience. And the success of all of the reports and the inspections we've had are because of the managers we've got and the commitment of the staff that we've got, who are totally committed to delivering high quality care and support to the residents of Denbighshire. Within the domiciliary support service, we've got around 57 carers. I say around because that fluctuates all of the time, and you'll be well aware that there is a recruitment to care crisis. And the carers that we have are often asked to shuffle shifts, pick up work that wasn't expected at the beginning of the week. And it's always a bit of a battle to make sure that we're delivering a service safely and a service that meets the needs of the citizens. Within the domiciliary service, we've got an array of support that we offer, which includes social care, health and social care workers, joint funded with BCU. We've got reablement workers, complex care workers, care and support workers, and within 3 extra care services, we've also got care and support workers as well. Just for reference, the 3 extra cares are place-based domiciliary support, so it's within a building, but people live in their own apartments. And they're based in Prestati in Real and Clysewalon, just across the road from here. The inspection is the first one under RISCA. We have been inspected in the past, but it was under the old legislation. But it is the first one ever for extra care, because extra care is relatively new as a concept and a service delivery model. It took place over 2 days. The inspector came and did a desktop review. She interviewed staff and citizens, and then she did a site visit to Gorwell Newid Extra Care in Real. As Ellen said, there was no areas of improvement. There was obviously areas that we would have preferred to be better, but that is our own critical eye looking at it and saying, actually, from this visit, we can see that we can change our services. And we've done that. CIW verbal feedback was given, and although the ratings at the moment aren't published, if there was a silent rating given, every area would have been good. I won't read the summaries because they are there for you to read. It might be better use if I just give you a bit of an overview of what the RI is and how that fits into quality assurance within our registered services. So under RISCA, there was the creation of a responsible individual role. This responsible individual role is for all providers of registered services, whether that's within the council or private providers. The intention of that role was to make sure that there was somebody within the service that was legally accountable for the service. And that's based on historical experience where people haven't been held account when services have failed. So it's quite a big responsibility, I feel it quite personally, but I'm very fortunate that I work for a local authority and I'm never really on my own with that responsibility. We've got a quality insurance policy, which was developed to reflect all of the requirements of the regulations of RISCA. And a whistle-stop tour of that is that we've got, we have to have monthly manager checklists that are completed by the individual managers in the different sites in our registered services. Each registered service has a quality review, 6 monthly, completed by the manager. And as the RI, I'm required by law to visit physically that site once every quarter and produce a report. At the end of every year, we are required to report to CIW what's under annual returns. It's quite a big piece of work for each registered service. And within that, that is then submitted to CIW and published on their website so that that can be viewed by members of the public. I think that's about it. All of our staff are required to register with Social Care Wales as professional registration. That was initially rolled out for domiciliary care workers, and latterly it's for the care homes as well. And as this report, the final sort of check and balance is CIW overview, where we're registered as a service provider.
Much, Katie.
Okay.
Members, any questions, observations, or points? Councillor Roberts.
That's an item
I
question.
don't have a question as such, but congratulations to Katie, and you're going for the excellent work that you do with carers, and especially that you promote the use of the Welsh language. That's come out in the reports. Congratulations.
Diolch. As you know, and we've talked about this many times, for us, Welsh language is about dignity in care. Very, very important. Moynag area and the action plan that we have. We've had some active work within our settings to promote the use of Welsh, to support Welsh learners amongst our staff. But actually it's part of the support that is given. So we're very proud of that. We've had some award winners within our service, specifically around Welsh language promotion, use of Welsh language. So very, very proud of that. Diolch.
Thank you. Councillor Ellie Chard.
Lovely to read the report, and it was good to read that new staff that are taken on actually work shadow shifts, and I thought that's great. It was good to read, and yeah, and I'd just like to mention that I did used to visit Godwell now with one of my little lady friends. She was there until the age of 98, and it was a super place, and I always fancied living in her flat because she was overlooking the seafront. But there you go. But thank you all, and thank you for our department looking after them.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Nigel Rudd.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. Firstly, congratulations to Councillor Ellen and the team for a really good report. The fact there were no areas of improvement identified, I think is remarkable. My question is...
Sorry, Nigel, sorry to interrupt. I don't think we can hear you. There's something wrong with the sound production. It's reverberating. I can't... Can you make it? I can't make it out. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Perhaps it's just me. I know some of us are struggling, but I think Gary's got better hearing. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please continue. But I see you've switched your screen off. That might be an idea. So try again. I do apologise for interrupting you.
Now?
Try again now.
Chair, can you hear me?
That's better. Yeah.
Yep. My question was, and it might well be one that Gary... Not hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my question was to Gary was to establish how the staff were being protected given the recruitment and retention issues here under the terms of the staff exit scheme.
Well, there are two issues effectively. Number one, the council's introduced recruitment controls, so all the majority of vacancies have to go through CET, but there are certain roles that are exempt, and roles in care tend to be exempt from those controls so that they can be advertised as and when they become vacant. And the other issue is that in respect of the voluntary exit scheme, it's been made very clear to all staff at the outset that whilst we've opened it to all staff to be able to express an interest in taking advantage of that scheme, not everybody who asks will be allowed to leave, and that there are two principal criteria. The first is, can the service afford to do without that role? And clearly that will form a critical part of any business case for voluntary exit. And the second is, do the numbers stack up? So it's not just a financial exercise. So heads of service are completing business cases for CET in respect of each individual. Each individual's circumstances will be different, but the head of service will be making a recommendation in those business cases as to whether or not that's a role that they can do without.
Okay, Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mark Young?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And as you say, when we read this in our meeting last week, it was a shock because we are used to doom and gloom. But I do think it's important that we remember what we do because we're always talking about what we're cutting and we celebrate success. So I've got a question, how we sharing this with our staff? And another request, I hope the press are on, they're very good at picking up negatives. This public document and the first line is absolutely positive, and they hope they also report good news. But the question is, how do we share this with our staff? I'm sure you have, but it'd be good to hear that. Jockenvale, thank you.
I was going to ask as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we share this with staff. It was circulated at the time. Now it's a little bit after the fact, isn't it, by the time we've got here. But we share this by circulating the document to managers. That would then be discussed in team meetings, one-to-one supervisions, and during my visits as well. You know, I like to celebrate the good news with the staff because it is them in the end that have created this and have led to such a positive outcome.
Thank you. I likewise was surprised and I'm pleasantly surprised that the service doesn't seem to be adversely affected by the recruitment and retention difficulties which we know are affecting the council as a whole and indeed other aspects of care services. You did mention that it seems to be, despite those difficulties, the service is being provided in the way it is. Sorry, Nicola, did you want to come in there? Sorry.
I think when Katie described earlier that juggling around, that asking staff to do additional shifts, to change the rotas and so on, it is probably a very simplified version of what happens. And actually, you know, the service is under considerable pressure because of those recruitment and retention challenges. We are incredibly grateful for the support that the staff give and their flexibility, but we are very, very cognizant that that is not sustainable permanently. So we are continuing to try and recruit to that service. Lots of opportunities for work experience, grow your own, lots of things the service is trying to do to promote careers within that direct care provision as a professional role. But it's very challenging, and I wouldn't want this committee to think that it's easy, because it really isn't. And Katie and the management team spend an awful lot of time, very, very close to the wire sometimes, in covering those. In fact, Katie herself will go in and cover shifts if necessary. Not ideal, but there are minimum requirements of staffing that have to be met, and that is the service priority.
Okay.
Just very quickly, so we know how hard it is. So to see the first line of a report, I'm going to read it out. People are happy with the service they receive and praise the standard of care delivered. Amazing, well done.
Easy, Lynn.
To follow up on what's been said, is there a plan by Ellen to put this in the press to celebrate the fact that this report is so positive, something to take pride in Denbighshire? Hopefully, Ellen, you'll have an opportunity to put this out there in the press by using your comms team, the comms team that the county has.
Sorry, Bobby Feely?
Just further to what you were saying, Nicola, do we are we beginning to bring the voluntary sector carers in to sort of try and help, not fill the gaps exactly, that doesn't sound right, but I know there's lots of willing volunteers out there who do things behind the scenes that none of us, know they're doing.
I think a lot of the voluntary work is probably before we're involved. Once we say somebody's got an assessed care and support need, it is going to be probably more likely than not that that remainder of the care and support that they need is from paid care workers. You know, that's not to diminish, you know, we don't see as many people because of that voluntary work. The Educare team do an awful lot to support people in the community, and we're really grateful for that. And where volunteers do want to come into our services, we do welcome them. What I would say is that volunteering has dropped off in our registered services since COVID and since people have gone back to work.
And can I just add my congratulations with everybody else for such a good report?
Thank you.
Yeah. Just on that point, it was mentioned about publicising amongst staff. Is this, sorry, perhaps I missed it, but has there been something out in the public domain as well? Or will there be, yeah, in terms of
This report
publicity?
is published on CIW website. It's publicly available, but we can certainly contact corporate comms and arrange with Alan to do a press release.
Say as a committee that should happen, but it just seems that there's so much, as I say, doom and gloom about, you know, and you know, when you get a positive report on a council service, it's nice to see something. Nicola, sorry.
We do have a communication strategy specifically for social care, you know, to try and raise the profile, to try and encourage people to come and work with us, but appreciate the services that are on offer. It's very difficult to get some of the media outlets to run these things. They tend to run. Yes. I was trying to how to word that without it coming across as critical, but yes, quite often, you know, we will always put positive news releases out through the comms team. They put them out all the time about adult social care. Do they get picked up by the media channels? Sometimes not.
Okay.
We run them on all of our social media channels. We've had TikTok videos, which were very popular, with some of our carers and our citizens. So we are continually trying to do that. But you can take a horse to water, you can't make it drink.
No. Okay. No other points on this from members? No. Okay. The recommendation is that the committee confirms it is read, understood, and taken account of the report. Is that the right recommendation? Yeah, it is. So, can I have a proposal like this? But Bobby Feely, seconded, please. Harwell Roberts, all in favour? Thank you. Okay. Next, we've got item 6, the Treasury Management Statement. I did suggest that we have a comfort break now. So I'm getting demand for that for some of my members here. So we will resume. It's 11:05 now. We'll resume at 11:15, if that's okay. Thank you. We'll proceed now with item 6, which is the Treasury Management. So I think Liz Thomas is going to give a summary, and then we'll open it up to any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly explain what you've got in your pack. I think we might have gone a little awry with our appendices, so I'll just explain what belongs to where. So the report is twofold. You've got the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, it's quite a mouthful, 24-25, and that's in Appendix 1, and it starts on page 43. It's a requirement to have approved a Treasury Management Strategy for the forthcoming year, and here in Denbighshire, the scrutiny of that is done by the Governance and Audit Committee, and then it will go to Council before the start of the financial year. And we've also then got the usual Treasury Management Quarterly Update, and that's in Appendix 2 on page 61. So it's twofold. So the Treasury Management Strategy Statement first. So members have all received training by Arlene Close, our Treasury Management Advisors. I was going to ask Councillor Feely, had she received the training? No, that's okay, Councillor Feely. We can arrange for you to get a copy of the slides. And if you want to spend some time with me or one of the team in going through and asking some questions, we can arrange that for you. So yeah, there was training by Alan Close to all members of the Governance and Audit Committee on the 18th of January, and I hope members found that useful. And if you've got any feedback following that training, because it's something we try to put on fairly regularly, please let us know. We can pass that on to Alan Close. So the Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25, I think it's important to note there's no material changes in the strategies that we are following. It's a continuation of what we have been doing over the past year or so. It's, you know, it's required to include a number of things under various regulation and legislation, and that includes an investment strategy, prudential indicators which are linked to Treasury management, and also the minimum revenue provision, and they're set out in various sections within that Appendix 1. The investment strategy, we take a prudent approach, and that is in the main to invest any surplus cash available on a daily basis with the UK Debt Management Office in the main. And the Treasury Management Strategy Statement will cover the requirements of the code of who we can invest with, how long for, and limits, and they split it into specified and non-specified investments. Those are requirements under the code that we have to have in place. There's also then in section 4 a borrowing strategy, and again that's a continuation. As a council, we have a long-term borrowing requirement that comes about from the capital programme. We can only borrow for a capital purpose. That comes about from that, and our strategy is to monitor interest rates so that we can lock in longer-term interest rates at the optimal time, but to use short-term borrowing in the meanwhile. And that, the proposal is to continue with that borrowing strategy. The minimum revenue provision is included. That's how we repay borrowing through the revenue account. That's unique to local government. Nobody else has an MRP. That's just local government that has this system. But that's how we repay borrowing, and there's no changes this year being proposed. It includes the reporting that we will do to the Governance and Audit Committee and Cabinet and Council throughout the year, and also other requirements such as training, Treasury management advisors, borrowing policies on borrowing in advance of need, and financial derivatives, and there's no changes to those. The appendices then to the Treasury Management Strategy statement, there are A, B, C, D and E, and I think D and E are coming after Appendix 2, and I think that's why it's somewhat confusing. So you've got D and E, which is the liability benchmark and the debt maturity profile on pages 81 and 83, but they belong with the Treasury Management Strategy. That's the strategy. The quarterly update then on Appendix 2, starting on page 61 of your pack. Again, this is update information to members in terms of how we're doing and following the current year strategy. So that's the 23-24 strategy. And we're following the investment strategy, investing with the DMO to minimise the risk to bank investments. So anything above 5 million will be with the DMO. And then the update on the borrowing strategy. So I mentioned earlier that we're balancing the short and the long-term borrowing need. Interest rates since we last updated have come down somewhat, and we have done some long-term borrowing during the quarter. So we meet regularly to talk about Treasury management, and we also meet regularly with Alan Close. So we've been in constant dialogue over the past few months with Alan Close around taking out longer term borrowing. So we have borrowed 26 million from the Public Works Loans Board to fund the the capital programme. We followed a process of little and often. You know, the day-by-day rates are quite volatile. So on the advice of Alan Close, it was do a little and often. So we've over that since November when we were last reporting to now, we've borrowed it in 5 times over that period. So we've done it in chunks. None of us have a crystal ball. You know, it looks like we're getting to the low points, and these are forecasts. It looks like we're getting there. We'll talk to Alan Close. We'll go for it. Sometimes the rate will go a little bit more down, or sometimes it'll go up. You know, it's like when you do your own mortgage. You know, you know the mortgage is coming. You know you need to do it, and sometimes the rates go favourably, not. But you don't want to. So it is moving on a daily basis, but we're constantly tracking that. And sorry, just looking at my notes. So and so we're also looking at UK Infrastructure Bank about the long-term borrowing associated with the flood schemes. So we are moving through that process to get that borrowing from the UK Infrastructure Bank, and that's included within the reports. Other things to note: we had an audit. Internal audit report was done in December, and we received a high level of assurance. So Bob and the team came out to look at the how we're following Treasury management processes and how we're following the strategy, and have received a high level of assurance. So that's it from me. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Just to say thank you also for arranging the training the other week from Ireland Close. I found it really good. I think I got positive comments from members there. We could do, I think all of us could do with copies of the presentation though. So just to say also, with the appendices D&E tucked at the back of the report, it's not a major gripe, but just there's the well-being assessment, all 15 pages of it. I'm not quite sure if we need all that, because a lot of it seems to be either neutral or not applicable. It just make the report a little easier to use. But
it's fair enough. Always happy to reduce the pages of a report for committee members wherever we can. We'll see what we can do.
I'm sure we might. We probably need a well-being assessment, but I suppose I think just a one-page summary would suffice. I think. Right. Members, questions, points, observations on the Treasury Management Report, both on the Treasury Management Statement, if you can make it clear which one you're referring to, or the update report. Any questions or points? Nigel Rudd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Liz, can you give an approximate timescale for the UK Infrastructure Bank borrowing negotiations to come to a conclusion? Because certainly on the training session that we had, which I endorse the Chair's comment on, was very helpful. UKIB seemed to be quite positive, institution well disposed to councils, and something we'll probably go back to at a future date as well.
About half of that, I think, Nigel. So I think the question was, what's the time scale around the borrowing from the UK Infrastructure Bank? So my understanding, and I will admit I've been focused on budget, but it's Rhiannon and the team that have been dealing with this. So I will confirm this for you, Nigel, in a note to all committee members around what that timescale is. We're obviously going through their process and they meet to approve. I think we've hit the initial acceptance around that because they've got limits on how much they can borrow. So I think we are making positive progress, and I expect that to come in a matter of months, I think. But I would need to confirm how many months. So I think we're in for the early stage of 24-25, but I would like to confirm that if I can.
Okay, Nigel? Yeah, thumbs up. Thank you. Bobby Feely?
This is probably going to be really naive, but thinking of my ISA, which was like 0.2%, 0.02%, 0.02% or something, and now is much, much better. Does this make a difference in terms of the money that's held in a bank or wherever it's held for interest rates? Does it make a difference getting bigger, better interest rates? And does it help the situation we are currently finding ourselves in?
Yes. So we will always have a cash flow position. So the simplest way to explain it is that we get a revenue support grant from Welsh Government, and we get that on a monthly basis. That always comes in at the beginning of the month. And of course, one of our biggest commitments every month will be paying salaries, and they go out towards the end of the month. There is always cash flows, it ebbs and it flows, and that's just to do with the timings of things. So we will always have some cash to invest, and of course we're in a higher interest rate environment, whilst our borrowing costs more, any investments that we have yield more return, so there is additional income coming through. But in this, and we're talking about treasury management, so it's important to note that our principles around that is, our aim isn't to chase the rate, it's to invest it securely, to invest it when we need it, so that the liquidity is there, so when the money is needed, it's there, and the final consideration is the yield, what the interest rate we get back is. So of course, in this one, we are mainly investing with the Debt Management Office, so that the rates what they get, and it will be linked to government borrowing, and that's the rate that we get. But it's higher than what it was earlier, a couple of years ago. So that does make a difference. However, the converse of that, of course, is we're borrowing for capital schemes, and that borrowing is also more expensive. So it's outweighing that. But it does, to answer your question, yes, it does make a difference, but it's outweighed by the borrowing requirement that we have. But it's taken into consideration through our budgetary process, in forecasting the demands for borrowing, what investments we'll have, what those rates will be. It's all taken into consideration when we're setting the budget, and we have a capital within the not within the services, but we have corporate and central budgets, and it forms part of that on the budget monitoring report.
And the reserves?
Yeah, the reserves will feature in that, because those are reserves that we're holding, so that's cash that we haven't spent, so they will feature in that as well.
Okay. No other questions? Oh, Mark.
Yeah, just a couple on so thanks, Chair. So just working on the risk and how we manage it, and obviously we've got large borrowings for the major infrastructure flood defences, which we're stuck with, and I publicly always raise my concerns over the size of that borrowing sat on our books, and the fact that it's not ring fenced the amount we get back. And I have read in your documents and in the public domain that Welsh Government are re-looking at how they do budget lines. So are they looking at making that ring fence? Because that would really make everyone feel better, because it's mixed in with other grants at the moment. And when we're in trouble, could they take that asset onto their books? And are we looking at that? Would we look at it? And is there a process where you could? Because that figure does really sit heavily on us. So just that, and I hope you don't mind the question. Thank you, Giacomo.
So I suppose, so we've got two major flood defence schemes going on at both Rail and Prestatyn, and the total cost of those schemes is in excess of 90 million. I think it's 92 million. So they are big flood defence schemes. So, if you look at Denbighshire, and I think this is as an important point, when we're comparing council against council, debt levels against debt levels, for example, you wouldn't compare us. I can say this in a public meeting. We wouldn't, if Powys, for example, aren't going to borrow for flood defence schemes because they haven't got a coast. So you know what I mean? It's I'm safe in being able to say that. In terms of comparing one against the other. So we do have, it is a requirement. A number of homes are being protected by those schemes, and we're committed to those schemes. It is a scheme that is 85% funded by Welsh Government and 15% funded by us. So of that 92 million, our requirement is 14 million, and the requirement of Welsh Government and the requirements from Welsh Government is 78 million. But the scheme is such that we borrow, so we've got all of the 92 million on our books, because they're our assets, our capital assets. But that is the cost of that borrowing will come through over a 25-year period through the revenue support grant, so through our financial settlement. So when it's coming in as a grant at the moment, so when that starts to come in, it will come in eventually through the revenue support grants. I understand there are legal agreements that provide a level of protection around that. And there are also, the way it has happened, is that there will be lines within the revenue support grants that are for specific councils associated with these schemes. So there is an element of protection around that from the legal documents, and also from it not coming in something else. It'll be a specific line within the formula, so we should be able to see it. There are other things that have happened like this. So they had the highway schemes a number of years ago, the local government borrowing initiative. They're still there, and some of the borrowing for some of the schools as well.
So that's great. Thanks for that. The question about if we were in trouble and we are got challenging times, could that conversation happen about putting it on their books? Because in reality, they're paying for it anyway, aren't they? So if we're under pressure, is it a conversation we could have and should have?
It's probably unlikely because it's ours. It's, you know, it's their Welsh Government are supporting us. So I think it's unlikely that it would transfer because of whose the assets is, and that would be, you know, a local government function rather than a national government function. So I think it's probably unlikely, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Bobby Feeling?
Further to that, as I understand it, just going on from what Mark has said, this was sanctioned, the flood defence work was sanctioned by the Welsh Government, but unusually, as I'm aware, we are having to pay up front as a council.
I think that the reason behind that is that the Welsh Government don't really have much borrowing powers. So it's just a sort of, why I'm answering, I guess it's a political mechanism so that they can empower councils to do things without having to go into their sort of basic revenue funding. They can't borrow to do these kinds of capital. So this is how the Welsh Government have facilitated these kinds of projects, which I guess it would be unlikely that they take it back for the same reason. You know, they couldn't take out the borrowing to pay for it. So yeah.
It just makes me feel a bit nervous, Chair, that with the building costs, which everybody knows has rocketed for any engineering, whatever it may be, construction or job, I feel very nervous about the fact that we've got to provide the money up front and then worry about getting it back and when it would come back. And right from the outset, I'm going back when we first started talking about it 2 or 3 years ago, I was putting out warning signals then, very nervous about the way it was going to be happening, and I'm just flagging it up here. You're getting my worries now.
I think that's something to take account of in other work of this committee. I mean, one of the assurances we seek, and not today, but the management of projects and so on. And I think that's very relevant to what you've talked about there. And you know that if things are going awry there, that there is a reporting mechanism for that. Councillor Arwell Roberts.
Thank you very much. I'll ask a question in Welsh. So you're going to hope that you're going to be able to arrange that all the work on the sea defences in Rail and Prestatyn, that the financial side, when it's finished, that you'll be fine. Until when is this going to continue, this payback of the money? And who will own the defences then, will that be Welsh Government or Denbighshire? I will check, but I'm confident that it's us who will own we would own the asset then. Sorry, what was the beginning of the question? I've missed the beginning. How long? Yeah, thank you. The Assembly of Government will pay back over a period of 25 years, but we can pay back over a longer period of time, and we will do that to do with what the life of the asset is. So if the asset is 40 years, or if the asset is, we don't usually go over 50. But something like this, I would expect there would be more than that. But if the asset is 50 years, we will borrow over that period of time, but the money will come from Welsh Government over 25 years. Just to confirm, I'm quite confident that it will be a council asset, or it's been built. So in the future, then Denbighshire will have to look after that asset, because there are problems going to arise, with flooding, when there's a risk there.
Okay. Okay, can I just ask a few questions myself, please? There's on page 41 of the pack, paragraph 4.6 of this in the cover report. You say that the capital strategy report will be reported to council in February, alongside the capital plan, and will include the following capital-related prudential indicators, and they say what they are there. Well, does the Governance and Audit Committee need to see the capital-related prudential indicators? We see other prudential indicators, as in other parts of this report. But given the, I suppose I'm informed by, I'm aware a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. But following on from the Arlene Close training we got, I mean, one thing that I think came out of that loud and clear was the revenue implications of capital borrowing, which you've alluded to in your summary at the start of this item. Given the risks associated with capital expenditure, borrowing and revenue implications for future years, does the GAC need to see more here to obtain the necessary assurances? I'm looking at later on in the report, it shows that the liability benchmark for 26-27 is almost a 70% increase on that for the last financial year. Now, it's not our job to, as I keep saying, to criticise decisions that are taken and so on, but in similar vein to what we were talking about before, I think we need assurance that when whoever does take the decision for capital expenditure and the way that it is funded, that the future risks are being taken account of and are being managed there. And presumably, the capital prudential indicators are indicative of those assurances, should they be coming to the GAC before they get reported elsewhere, in your opinion?
I think, my understanding, different authorities do this differently. So I think here at Denbighshire, that traditionally the Treasury Management has come with the Treasury Management indicators. But as we've already had a discussion this morning, Treasury Management is around borrowing is around capital. So that there are clear links. So I think traditionally that's the way it's been done here. The capital strategy report is a fairly new report that's been introduced by SIPFA, possibly 2 or 3 years in. It hasn't been around for that long a time. But you would have always had a prudential indicator report before then. So being fairly new in post, I haven't had a discussion around why it was the decision was made to split those prudential indicators into capital and into Treasury Management. But it's certainly something I can consider for future years. Once the capital report is ready, I can circulate it to the members of the Governance and Audit Committee. And if anybody's got any questions around that, outside of that, I'm happy to take those, and no issue with that. And I will get a further understanding of why it was done that way and around the terms of references, but I'm happy to consider that moving forward.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to answer the question on the hoof today, so
No.
to speak, without understanding why that had been done in that way.
So perhaps if you could come back, perhaps on the next Treasury Management quarterly update. It just does. I'm not saying we should, but it just seems to be a disparity. We get those prudential indicators, but not those. Precisely. And bearing in mind, as I say, it's like warning signs that I suppose what we're after is any warning, and assurance that any warnings about the way capital is being capital expenditure is being funded that's going awry in some way.
Yeah.
Going on page 63, you talk about the medium-term strategy for capital, and this sounds a really unfair question because I know you're under great pressure at the moment, and there's lots going on. But it says that work to develop a medium-term strategy is for capital is progressing. The last update in November said this, and of course, before you were in post, the annual report we saw in July said the same thing. I just wondered, it just keeps saying it's progressing. Could we have a little more detail on that? Perhaps if not now.
Yeah, no, I take the point. No, I don't doubt that's not true. If that's the case, that's fair enough. There is what do we mean? Because again, we just talked about capital strategy, and that's SIPFA's version of capital strategy. I think this is a different version of capital strategy. This is what's the strategic direction of the council in terms of capital. Well, actually, that's about to change. One of the recommendations that we will bring forward to Cabinet in the next month, and also to Council at the end of the month, is around, because it's a thing that a number of members have raised through the budget process, is around affordability and about capital ambition and the impact of that on budget moving forward. So there are proposals to change the focus around capital. So although that's been in there and continuing to develop a medium-term financial strategy, I think that's kind of changed through the budgetary process this year. So I think there is one coming. It is changed, I think, from what was envisaged at that point in time. So I note, I'll take it away and will bring a further update in the future.
A few other questions on my part on Treasury Management. We asked during the training session with Arlene Close, we asked what would their approach be if they were concerned in their role as the council's appointed Treasury Management consultants, if they were concerned about the council's borrowing borrowing and investments. I asked this in one of the training sessions, and the response was that they'd probably contact the most senior financial officer, which would be yourself. And I'm sure that would be absolutely fine. But if that was to change or something was to go wrong, and I'm thinking in particular, we've discussed in this committee before, a recommendation was made to watch the BBC Panorama programme on Thurrock Council. And in that case there, contacting the chief financial officer wouldn't have been much good, because the chief financial officer was very hard to contact, because he was in meetings with a developer in a Mayfair hotel lots of the time. This is all on BBC iPlayer. If you want to watch it, I recommend that you do. But I just wondered, I'm not quite sure we got a full assurance there. I mean, obviously they would contact you. That's what I would expect. But if they felt they weren't getting a sufficient response from the Section 151 officer, is there anything in their contract which would require them to speak to someone else? And I'm talking about such as the chief executive, the lead member, myself, or the chief internal auditor, or myself as chair of the GAC.
I doubt it's that specific in the contract, to be honest. I'll double check, but I doubt it is. But I think it's a valid point. I think we can we should take that forward and possibly, communicate formally with Alan Close to sort of say that, yeah, initial to confirm the arrangements, that the initial point of contact would be the responsible finance officer, being myself. But if they had concerns and needed to raise it, that they were able to raise it with monitoring officer, chair of governance and audit committee, and also the
I
lead
meant the
member.
monitoring officer as
Yeah.
well. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot. No, I think I mean, again, I go back to mention was made of that SIPFA report before on section 114 authorities, and one of the criticisms was that people, and particularly levelled at government and audit committees, people didn't ask what was going on. Well, which is a valid point, but we need to know things. If there are valid concerns there, we need to be aware of them. We'd like to think that would never happen here, but I'm sure people in those authorities said the same thing as well. So, okay, point taken. So you'll come back on that. Also, on if there's changes in our investments which are needed due to sudden changes in market conditions, we live in volatile times, and I think you mentioned this in the report on page 48. Yeah, on paragraph 3.8, sorry, yeah, it says when deteriorating financial market conditions affect the creditworthiness of all organisations, as happened in 2008, and that's the financial crisis in 2008, and in 2020, this is not generally reflected in credit ratings. There was a slightly broader question here, but if there is a sudden change in our investments required due to sudden things happening out in the wider world that has happened then, would we have sufficient staff resources and sufficient staff recovery to respond to that, where instant decisions might be needed?
Yeah, I think we would. We have a number of staff that are trained to act on our behalf in terms of treasury management, and it's something that we're always mindful of in ensuring. So I think in the report we said we've trained up another member of staff to ensure we have got enough cover. But I wouldn't want members to think that we've got a whole army of people either. It's, Treasury is normally, it's a few individuals that are trained in.
I did what you said so in the report, yeah.
So it is a specialism within the finance function in ensuring that we have the right level of cover. I suppose just to answer the point a little bit wider, around that. So within the investment strategy, we could invest in certain things. So there's mention of things like money market funds and things like that. This council at this moment in time isn't. We are investing with, we have a small limit of 5 million for the current bank accounts. And also the rest of it is with the Debt Management Office, which is the UK government. So actually, and having done treasury management in another authority, the way it would work there is we were investing in other things. And if we got to a volatile period, then our safe place was always the Debt Management Office anyway. So it's, and
we're minimising the risk.
The risk here is pretty minimal at the moment because that's where the bulk of our investments are. But that's not to sort of say in the future we can under the strategy, the availability is there. But of course, Governance and Audit Committee and Council set the strategy, which we as officers then follow. I wouldn't change that custom without discussing that here at GAC first.
Okay, thank you. And the last question from me is on page 55 of the pack. This is in the strategy, the actual treasury management strategy statement itself, and this is where I think this is the PIs, isn't it? The on the table under 1.2 there. And I've meant to ask this question in previous reports, and I've never had time, but I want to know myself. But in that table there, when it says this is the upper limit for variable rate exposure, and it says the approved percentages are 100% on the top row and 40% on the bottom row. Stupid question of mine, but what's percentage of what? Sorry, I don't quite understand what that's saying
Of
to me.
so the limit allows for the use of variable rate debt to offset exposure. So it's the net position of borrowing and investments. So what it's doing there is saying that this is about certainty around interest rates and giving a level of protection there. So what it's saying is that, all of our borrowing could be fixed, but you're limiting your exposure to variable rates, which can change. So with economics, variable rates could change and you'd be exposed to that. So as a local authority, you forego the interest rate in order to have the certainty because of the longer term. So that's where those indicators are coming in. And to show that in practice, in terms of, say, our borrowing requirements, there is a need to keep an eye on the level of short-term borrowing, because that is subject to interest rate and exposure. So that is then making sure that we're not borrowing too much short-term, because all of a sudden, if short-term isn't available or the rates increase, we're dependent on the rate at that time, whereas fixed is fixed, it's longer, and we've got certainty around that. That sort of helps to demonstrate how that works in practice.
You've got that. I'll think about it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or points from members? Councillor Roberts.
Not a question again, sorry, but apology. I should have mentioned that I am a member of the Group Pension Fund scheme, that I pay monthly into that. And also apologies that I didn't have a chance to go on the course that you mentioned, Alan Close. I had to go to a funeral over in Anglesey that day. So if I could join with Bob Feely to have that course from you, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. We'll set something up. Noni osod rwbeth cyn.
We'll do that before. I think not discussing treasury. We're discussing treasury management again in June, are we? In June. So we'll make sure that that's done before then, so that you're aware.
Okay. Points on this one? No other questions? We've got 3 recommendations before us. One, that the committee reviews the Treasury Management Strategy Statement of 24-25 and the prudential indicators for the next 3 financial years. That members note the Treasury Management Update Report, and that the committee confirms it is read, understood and taken account of the Wellbeing Impact Assessment in Appendix 3 as part of its consideration. So can I have a proposal for that, please? Mark Young, seconder. Harwell Roberts. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you, Councillor Ellis. We go on now to item 7, the RIPA annual report. RIPA regulatory. I'll let Gary say it.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that we bring on an annual basis in respect of the exercise of the authority's powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, otherwise known as RIPA. First of all, I need to point out that there's a glaring error in the report, and it doesn't say the date that it's from. So it's since the last time we brought a report to the committee in July 22 until the end of the calendar year 2023. I think you have asked in the past that these sorts of reports come as information reports. And that was the intention, I think, with this. However, between the preparation of the report and the publication of the pack, we've been contacted by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office to notify us that we're inspected on a 3-yearly rotation. And they've notified us that our turn for an inspection is coming up. I think probably just to set a little bit of context, the report makes clear we haven't used any of these powers. We hadn't used any of these powers in the last annual report. We haven't used any of these powers in this annual report. And the reason for that is that the Protection of Freedoms Act that was brought in just over 10 years ago effectively changed the way in which these powers work. So the RIPA legislation allows local authorities to authorise what's called directed surveillance. And prior to the Protection of Freedoms Act, local authorities used that a lot. And frankly, some authorities overused it, and it brought the whole thing into a little bit of disrepute. The government brought in the Protection of Freedoms Act, which said that you could only use these powers in respect of investigations for relatively serious matters. And as well as having your own internal authorization process, then you then have to go to the magistrates court to get their permission as well to do it. Frankly, as an aside, what's the point of our internal authorization process if you also have to go to court? Why don't you just make it an application to court for authorization? But there we are. That's where the legislation is at the minute. The reason why we don't do it is because a lot of the things that we might have used it before no longer qualify, because they don't carry a custodial sentence. And the other issue is that, of course, good practice is that we should use other ways, less intrusive ways of obtaining information, and technology and data sharing has moved to such an extent that we're able to do a lot of that without having to do intrusive surveillance. So that's a snapshot. The way in which the inspections are being carried out now. Previously, when local authorities were using these powers, an inspector would come in, they'd go through all of our authorizations, they'd interview key staff. Because most local authorities are not using these powers anymore, they've moved to a desktop type inspection. So we've had a letter from the inspectors asking us a series of questions, informing us that the responses to those questions will determine whether or not they will do an inspection. If they do it, they'll do it remotely. But they will be dip sampling a certain proportion of authorities to do an in-person inspection, and so we might get picked out in respect of that. So the inspector has sent us a preliminary letter. We've answered those questions. I think the letter went off yesterday. But part of the Home Office Code of Practice in respect of RIPA is that local authorities should regularly report to their members on their usage of the powers, and provide members with the most up-to-date copy of the RIPA policy. So that's the purpose of this report. Happy to answer any questions on.
Any questions, points, or observations for Gary on this? Just one thing I was seeing myself on paragraph 4.7, you say refresher training to investigation officers and authorising officers in an area, but you say it's a training event was held in November. That's to those officers we know. I suppose the only assurance I'd be looking for is that there aren't people who are in the council who might unwittingly go and breach these regulations, and a bit through lack of awareness. They think it never occurred to them that this exists in the first place.
Sorry, apologies. So there are two aspects to that. Number one, the officers who work in the regulatory environment who might be investigating offences which could meet the threshold, and they're people like trading standards officers. They have their own professional training in respect of this. We have done awareness raising with other departments where there's the potential for them to be unwittingly conducting surveillance. So, for example, the use of people's social media profiles. There's long legal sort of justification for why that falls within it. But even though people put stuff out into the public domain, it can still constitute surveillance if you interrogate that information and follow it up more than just a cursory glance. So there have been awareness sessions for officers in other departments for them to understand the limits of those sorts of things. And that's part of the response that we've sent to the inspector, because that's the sort of thing they're interested in as well. The only people who can authorise surveillance are members of CET, so that's the corporate directors or the chief executive. But the training is also for people who might be seeking authorisation, and we'll be running another training event again this year, just as a refresher for people who are involved.
Thank you. Any other questions or points on this one? Right, the recommendation is that the committee receives and acknowledges the report and provides any comments in respect of its content and the attached policy document. Can I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Ellie Chard, seconder, Bobby Feely. All in favour? Thank you. Right, we come item 8, the Governance and Audit Committee work programme. When I got this, I just realised that there's quite a few changes going to be required to what you've got required to what you see in front of you here. If we take the next meeting for March, there's the statement of accounts closed down. Now, Mike Whiteley has been waiting very patiently on behind his screen there, and I think he's going to say something about this. Are you, Mike? So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just check you can hear me okay, Jeremy? I'm having some IT difficulties today, so I just wanted to check. Yeah, can you hear me okay? Brilliant, thank you. And thank you and good morning, members. At the last committee meeting in November, we gave an update on the audit timetable, and we committed to keep the committee updated to any changes or potential slippage in our work. Unfortunately, I'm in the position today where I need to inform you of some delays in our work. We're experiencing quite a high level of staff sickness. And although we have secured some additional resources from our teams in South Wales to fill those gaps, there has been a delay in obtaining that. They are kind of doing that work now. We're well on with the work. But much like Liz was mentioning earlier, around reports coming for the March committee being an early March committee and committee papers needing to be in, a week or 2 weeks before, we're unable to meet that deadline to report our audit findings in the ICE 260 to the March committee. My proposal, Chair, is that we report to the April 24 committee with a verbal update at the March committee to give assurance to members that the work is still on track at that point. I think we've committed with Liz and Rhiannon and the team to ensure all of that work is complete by the end of March at the absolute latest, given the implementation of the new ledger system from the 1st of April and all of the other high profile, really important work that the team do other than dealing with us. The day job is there, they've got lots on their plate, so we know we have to get the work finished by then and report back to yourselves as members on the 24th of April, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So we're talking, instead of getting it in March, we're talking about the 24th of April or a verbal update then, if you can't produce it. Is that what you said?
No, Chair, the plan would be just to for myself to attend the 6th of March meeting and give a verbal update of audit progress at that stage to give members reassurance that we are still on track to get all that work finished by the end of March and hopefully before. With then the formal reporting in our ICE 260 audit findings report to be presented at the 24th of April committee, Chair.
Okay, this is called the statement of accounts closed down. But is that when we get the draft statement of accounts?
No, I don't think so, Chair. I think that name's a bit of a misnomer. That's not a phrase or a title to our work we would use. Effectively, it's the conclusion of the 22-23 audit with the 23-24 draft financial statements coming later in the year.
Okay. I was thinking, sorry, Mike, thank you. I'm sorry I cut in on you then, but I was thinking they're quite, we're going to get this report in April. What's not in this programme is the draft statement of accounts, which we normally get, which is quite a big item. And then, of course, the final statement of accounts together with the auditors, the Audit Wales report on those accounts. And they're not in it, and they're quite big items by their very nature. One of my concerns, I'm going to say, is the size of some of the items in this programme. We've had several meetings over the year where we've gone on. We started at 9:30 today. I'm looking at Councillor Feely. She doesn't know what she's in for here. We've still been here at 2 o'clock on some occasions, which I don't think is really acceptable for members. We just can't give the attention that's required. I mean, there's no drink, there's no food, and somehow we need to reduce the time of our meetings. I try to chair it in such a way that I try to structure Yeah, the way the questions come. So can we ask a question on this section, question on that section, etc. Personally, I don't think the reason our meetings go over is because members are asking too many questions. I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is we've got a lot of bulky items. We're trying to also mitigate that partly by having more information reports, as we said last time. Some of the annual reports, such as RIPA, we just had CIRO last time, health and safety, property compliance, we're going to ask for as information items, but there's still no getting away from it. So if you look at March now, the next meeting, we don't know what external regulatory reports there might be, but there will be some. From the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs meeting earlier this week, we're going to get one on performance, Gary, aren't we? Where there's some comments about the nature of the.
Yes, I'm just trying to remember the name of it, but yes, it's an Audit Wales report that's going to performance scrutiny.
Yes, I can't remember. It's the use of the use of performance information, service user perspective and outcomes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got that to fit in sometime. Also, probably before then, there's the TECL assessment, which will probably come as an information report, but members might have questions on it.
Yes.
That's to do with Denbighshire Leisure, the TECL assessment. We're waiting a few updates. I think there was an update on the JICPA inspection. Anything coming from that? But there's also, I mean, for March, the only other major item at the moment with the internal audit update, which is a major item for us, and also the annual report on the Constitution. I'm not quite sure if that's there's never been one since I've been in post.
The Constitution, it's a tidy up report basically. So following the SLT review, there have been service changes where we've moved from one place to the other. It's just to tidy up the scheme of delegation to make sure that all the right delegations have gone to the right place. And that report will come so that it can then go to council afterwards, just to formally. It's not new delegations; it's just making sure that it looks neat and tidy. No, it's not a heavy report.
Obviously, we can ask on anything, but okay. So I'm more concerned about the April meeting actually, because on April the 24th, we've just said before we're going to get this report from extra report on the financial situation, which we've asked Liz Thomas to provide. We're hopefully going to get the statement of accounts closed down then. We've got a regular treasury management update then. We've got the council performance management guide, and we've got the net carbon zero report, all of which are quite substantial items. And I can't see how we can, if we push those back, then it will just compound the situation in further ones. So any ideas that members have got, either now or email me at some other date, would be most welcome. Mark.
Yeah, no. So there is a point where people shouldn't be in the meeting for so long. So I hear what you're saying, but I do think we have to have a reasonable cut-off point. So we have to deal with the workload, don't we? Somehow, you wouldn't want it. So I hear what you're saying, but in the end, you wouldn't want to be here a long length of time for several meetings on the run. But some of it, I'm guessing, is a challenge timing wise.
I think looking at your forward work programme, Chair, June at the minute is light. What I will do is I'm guessing, won't put words in members' mouth, but your priorities would be in April, the report that was discussed earlier under the budget process, your treasury management update. I will speak to officers about items 5 and 6 in April to see if either of those could be bumped into June.
Yeah, sorry, Gary, you say June looks light. I mean, just going over the page here, the reports, we've got the internal audit annual charter and strategy, the internal audit annual report. We've also got the internal audit update, both of which, those three tend to attract a bit of focus. I think I've suggested to Bob, and I think it's been worked on, so that the internal audit update, the periodic update to March, and the annual report, I think it's possible they might be combined in some way to, but there'll be the annual governance statement, then also the performance self-assessment as well. So June looks to me quite heavy.
Well, looking at items 5 and 6
Yeah.
for April, I'll discuss with officers whether there's anything in there which would enable those to be information reports that you would receive, and then you can decide whether or not you want to take them as substantive agenda items at a later date. In terms of June, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd flicked over and I'd gone from one meeting to the other and it missed stuff out.
I mean, just I mean that's fine by me. Just that you mentioned the one of the reports you might push back is the council performance management guide. It's not so much that. Sorry, I was just looking in June. We've got the performance self-assessment, and then that presumably has to be considered by us. That's quite a
Yes, that
substantive
has to
report.
part of the legislation is it needs to come here.
In July, we've got the annual complaints process report as an information report. I'm happy for that to be an information report. The only question I've got on that is that the legislation specifically mentions that it should be reported to GAC. We would be non-compliant with that if it came as an information report.
I don't think so, but I will
No.
double check for you, but I don't
Okay.
think so.
Okay, I think the other thing in the work program is that I think it was in the minutes that we're down, you, Mark and myself are down to meet sometime on this to try to look at this. So we probably need to progress that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, Margaret, on the work program is that the future items there, I think at the bottom of it, there's a table at the bottom that I think some of those, I thought some of them have disappeared, but they seem to have popped up again. The updates and commissioning of older people's homes, that's been as a future item ever since I've been in post for 18 months now. Yeah.
I'll follow those up with the relevant officers.
Internal audit follow-up report, exceptions and exemptions. I thought that had disappeared. I thought there was no need for it. I don't know if Bob knows about that, but we don't have to deal with that now. But also capital project contingency report. I'm not quite sure what that is. Again, I think they've been there for a long time, but I think we need to tidy the program up.
I think, if I remember correctly, the capital project contingency report, I understood that's very old, and I understood that had been dealt with. It related to concerns raised by a member who's not a member anymore. I think it was former Councillor Holland who raised that in respect of a project around contingency, and I think it's been dealt with. I think it's been, so that needs a tidy up, but I'll check with Liz.
Well, if we have this meeting, we can.
Yeah.
Just before we go off this point, before we approve the programme, or otherwise, future training dates. The only thing it's got there is assurance rating, which is outstanding. It's work that was requested by members with internal audit and how internal audit assurance ratings are awarded and decided on. I've met with Bob. I have a regular one-to-one with Bob every few months, and I've suggested that when we have that training session, rather than just narrowing it on that, I think it needs to include that as an important point that we need to understand as a committee. But I think also we need to understand how audits are scoped. Otherwise, when an audit project starts, how is it determined what it includes and what doesn't it include? And maybe I think something on the status of internal audit as well. I think internal audit can be viewed on just another thing that reports to this committee on an ongoing basis. I think internal audit is far more important to us as a committee than that. And I think perhaps we might need to think about that role a bit more. That might be subject of a separate training session, but that's what I've suggested to Bob. But certainly that one on assurance ratings, but a bit more on the way the internal audit operates. So if that's okay with members, any objections to that? No. I've also suggested that as far as training is concerned, that we might need. There's a further self-assessment. At the last meeting, Paul Witham, the other lay member, suggested that March and April we have a further meeting to progress the self-assessment session that we had last summer. I think that would be good. I think we also need to, from that, there might be some changes of our terms of reference that are required. So with your permission, unless anybody objects, Mark and I will speak to Gary on that. But also we're looking to have in March and April, perhaps I've spoken to Bob about this, another self-assessment session to further what we did last year to take things forward there. Just to remind you, it's assessing our performance and the way we operate against SIPA's benchmarks for government and audit committees. The only other thing I think we might need training on thinking about for the future, we've talked about risk management and the corporate risk register. There might be more there, and possibly something on the new, I believe there's new procurement rules for local authorities, which might be of interest and background information to us as a committee.
Yes, we could certainly arrange that, and if we do that, then we'd open it out to members generally as well. So, but I'll speak to the procurement team about timescales.
Anything else on the work programme or training, members? Right, do we need to approve this, the work programme? Well, guys, I think I think the recommendation is that we agree this work programme subject to ongoing changes, which I will and Mark will discuss with the monitoring officer, and we'll come back at the next meeting. So, all Arwell in favour, Mark seconded, all in favour? Yes, thank you. And the last letter, thank you for bearing with me. The last item is the Ombudsman's annual letter, which is the information report. I don't know if there's any questions on it. It's only an information report. Just to say, I've read it. I'm not sure how meaningful the report is in this respect. It gives a number of complaints, but I think that's fairly meaningless. You could have one complaint, that would be absolutely devastating. You could have 500 complaints, which are drivel, basically. So a number of... be careful here. Minute this, please. I'm not quite sure how meaningful the report is. We have to have it. To me, a more meaningful, I think we have to have it now because I believe it's going to standards committee to consider.
The annual report of the Ombudsman's got two focuses, focuses. The first is public service complaints. The other aspect is code of conduct complaints. Code of conduct is obviously a matter for standards committee, so we will take this letter to the standards committee about that because there's been a downward trend nationally. This really gives you a picture of the Ombudsman's work across Wales, and actually for it to be more meaningful for you, when you get your annual report around complaints, you'd expect that report to take the key messages from this in a Denbighshire context.
As an
Yes, as an appendix.
Appendix to that report, yeah. Yeah, I think it would be useful. Councillor Feely.
They say they're doing a second wider own initiative investigation, this time looking into carers' assessments within local authorities. I don't know whether we need to.
I think, well, obviously we'll get the outcome of that work because this is their letter about their work across Wales. And what the Ombudsman has had over the last few years is, I think they previously felt that they had to deal with the complaints that they get in. And of course, as the chair said, some of those will be of varying quality. But they couldn't investigate things that they might be concerned about unless somebody complained about them. But now they've got the own initiative right to launch investigations, and they've done some quite big pieces of work over the last few years. So I think they're just setting out here, this is what they intend to do in the coming year. But given that that is something that would relate to matters of interest to the council, then I'm sure we'll get the outcome of that work, and that might form a different report to this or another committee.
I would suggest that we see what comes out on that. We note it, but we wait to see what comes out.
That complaints are down. So I think that would be welcome, and it means perhaps that things are getting through to people.
I've looked at the bottom and Town Community Council Quarter complaint. There's no mention of Denby there. Denby's not there.
In our county, and then they got Towyn and Kinwell Bay Town Council, which is not in our county.
That's because this is the Ombudsman's report for the whole of Wales, and it will only name councils from which a complaint has arisen. So if there's been no complaint made to the Ombudsman, then that town council won't appear in their time period. Okay, I've not got the particular table in front. This isn't a Denbighshire letter. It's a Wales annual letter by the Ombudsman generally to everybody in Wales. The stats will relate to the sources of complaints that they've had to deal with during the period of the report. So if a council hasn't had a complaint in respect to code of conduct, it won't appear in the report, essentially.
As an info item, there's as an information item, there's no recommendation to this report. So I think we just say that we've noted it. So okay. I think that concludes our business unless there's anything else anybody wants to raise. We don't do any other business as an agenda item. So it just remains me to say thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your first attendance. Hope to see you again. Diolch yn fawr. Safe journey home. I'll see you at the 6th of March. Just let me add that if any members ever want to meet with myself as chair on a one-to-one basis, just send me an email and that can be arranged. Thank you.